5:43 a.m., September 11th, 2001. A man checks in at a small airport counter in Portland, Maine. His name is Muhammad Atta. A government screening program called CAPS quietly flags him for extra scrutiny. Here's what almost nobody realizes about that flag. It didn't stop him from boarding. Under the rules in place that morning, it only meant his checked bags would wait on the tarmac until he was confirmed on board. He wasn't pulled aside. He wasn't searched by hand. CAPS was working exactly as designed, screening checked bags for explosives, never passengers or carry-ons. Atta connects through Boston's Logan Airport and boards American Airlines Flight 11, bound for Los Angeles. Somewhere on him or in his carry-on is a small blade, likely a box cutter. Nobody stops that either. FAA rules at the time permitted small knives like his to fly, the kind that would be banned within days. This wasn't a screener missing a weapon. This was federal policy. At 7:59 a.m., Flight 11 pushes back from the gate. Less than 50 minutes later, it slams into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Within the hour, 3 more flights are hijacked the same way, the same legal tools, the same blind spot. By nightfall, nearly 3,000 people are dead. The way America flies is about to change forever. But here's what most people get wrong. The changes you assume happened overnight, the armored cockpit door, the armed pilot standing between you and the flight deck, didn't. Some took over a year. One of them, buried in the law itself, almost never happened at all. So why was a rule like that even on the books? It wasn't an oversight. It was 30 years of hard data pointing the government somewhere else entirely. 1969, 40 hijacking attempts on American aircraft in a single year. Almost every one ended the same way. The plane landed, usually in Cuba, and nobody died. Federal officials watched this pattern for years. They concluded a hijacker thousands of feet in the air almost never wanted to bring the plane down. He wanted a ride. That belief became doctrine. Crews trained under the common strategy: don't fight, don't resist, comply, buy time for a negotiated landing. For 30 years, it worked. If you didn't know any of this either, you're not alone. Hit like, subscribe if this channel's new to you, and drop where you're watching from, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. President Clinton creates a commission chaired by Vice President Gore to study aviation security. It focuses almost entirely on one danger: bombs hidden on planes, not hijackings, because historically, explosives had killed far more people in the sky than hijackers ever had. The system wasn't blind. It was built on 30 years of real evidence. It just never accounted for a hijacker with no intention of landing the plane at all. And there was already a warning on record, buried in a government report, that the whole defense was starting to crack. Here's the part that should make you angry. That crack in the defense wasn't a secret. It was written down. June 2000, 15 months before the attacks, the U.S. Government Accountability Office publishes a report to Congress with a title that says exactly what investigators found. Airport screener performance was impaired by long-standing problems. Investigators ran their own hidden tests, planting fake weapons and explosives in carry-on bags to see if screeners would catch them. Back in 1987, screeners missed 20% of those objects. The FAA itself called that unsatisfactory. By 2000, GAO reported the trend was getting worse, not better, as the fake threats got more realistic. The actual numbers from the 1990s were classified. The direction wasn't. Investigators traced the cause to something almost mundane. At the busiest airports in the country, screener turnover topped 100% a year. At one airport, it passed 400%. Almost nobody stayed long enough to get good at the job. Why would they? Most were paid close to minimum wage, less than they could make flipping burgers at the airport food court next door.
So this wasn't only a story about a legal loophole for small knives. Even where a weapon was supposed to be illegal, the people paid to catch it were quitting faster than they could be trained to find it. Congress had this report, the FAA had this report, and still, on the morning of September 11th, none of it had changed. But even a better staffed checkpoint would still have faced a system that wasn't designed to stop the tactics used on September 11th, because the real failure wasn't sitting at the X-ray machine at all. Here's how it played out, minute by minute, exactly as the old doctrine assumed it would, until it didn't. American 11 hijacked around 8:14 a.m. somewhere over central Massachusetts. Half an hour later, United 17 climbing out of the same airport, same route. Neither crew fought back. They'd trained for compliance, for a hijacker who wanted a landing, not a runway they'd never see. 8:46, Flight 11 hits the North Tower. 9:03, while the world is still staring at the first fire, Flight 175 hits the South Tower. By then, American 77 had already been hijacked too, over southern Ohio, same pattern. 9:37, it strikes the Pentagon. 3 planes, 3 hijackings. In every case, the same behavior the common strategy had trained into everyone on board. Comply and wait for a negotiation that was never coming. Then there was United 93. Scheduled to leave Newark at 8 a.m., it sat on the runway through heavy morning traffic and didn't take off until 8:42, more than 40 minutes late. That delay bought its passengers something the others never had: time. By the time hijackers stormed the cockpit at 9:28, people on board had already made phone calls. They'd already heard what happened to the other 3 flights. They knew something the old playbook never accounted for. This hijacking wasn't going to end with a landing. A group of passengers moved to retake the plane. 9:03 a.m., United 93 crashes into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, short of whatever the hijackers were aiming for, likely the capital. Here's something the timeline usually skips. The South Tower had already collapsed 4 minutes before United 93 went down, 9:59 a.m. The North Tower followed 25 minutes after Flight 93 crashed, coming down at 10:28. By the time the dust settled, both towers were gone. By day's end, 2,977 dead, not counting the 19 hijackers, 343 of them New York City firefighters. It remains the deadliest terrorist attack ever carried out on U.S. soil. But here's the part that gets skipped even more. At 9:42 that morning, before either tower fell, the FAA did something it had never done in the history of American aviation. It grounded every single flight over or bound for the continental United States. Within about 2.5 hours, roughly 3,300 commercial flights and 1,200 private planes landed safely wherever was closest across the US and Canada. A government that couldn't stop 4 hijackings already underway somehow managed to empty the entire sky nationwide in under 3 hours. No warning, no rehearsal. So the system could move fast when it had to, which raises the question hanging over everything that happens next. If the FAA could ground 4,500 aircraft in a single morning, why did airlines get until April 2003, a year and a half later, to install a hardened door between a hijacker and a cockpit? Why didn't Congress authorize an armed pilot program until more than a year after the attacks? The emergency response was immediate. The actual fix was anything but. 2 days after the attacks, September 13th, the FAA closed the loophole. Blades of any length, box cutters included, banned outright from every cabin in America. The rule that investigators had warned about months earlier was changed within 2 days after the attacks. Then, the bigger structural change. November 19th, 2001, Congress creates the Transportation Security Administration, moving airport screening out of the hands of low-bid private contractors and into the federal government for the first time. Here's the detail almost nobody knows. The Department of Homeland Security, the agency people assume TSA belongs to, didn't exist yet. TSA spent its first year living inside the Department of Transportation. DHS wasn't created until a year later, November 2002, and that's when TSA got folded into it. So within about 10 weeks, the government banned the weapon and rebuilt the entire screening workforce from scratch. If you've made it this far, drop a comment and tell me one thing from this video you didn't know before today. Because everything up to this point moved fast. A ban, a new agency, thousands of new federal employees. But there was one fix that mattered more than any of it. A locked door between a hijacker and a cockpit. And it wasn't a political problem anymore. It was an engineering one. And engineers don't move at the speed of Congress. So why did a locked door take so long? Because a cockpit door isn't just a door. It's a pressure vessel wall, thousands of feet in the air. Within weeks of the attacks, airlines rushed out a stopgap. By mid-October 2001, major U.S. carriers had bolted steel bars and temporary locks onto existing doors on 4,000 aircraft in just 32 days. But the FAA knew this quick fix came with a real cost. Those reinforced doors could interfere with how a cockpit is supposed to vent air pressure during a rapid decompression, an already rare but genuinely dangerous emergency. Regulators accepted that trade-off temporarily because stopping a hijacker mattered more in that moment than a much rarer mechanical failure. The permanent fix needed to solve both problems at once. January 11, 2002. The FAA publishes a new standard. Cockpit doors on more than 6,000 aircraft now have to resist forced intrusion, small arms fire, even fragmentation from something like a grenade. But that same door still has to let air escape fast enough, within milliseconds, to avoid catastrophic structural damage if the cabin ever loses pressure. And pilots still need to get out through it in a real emergency. Engineers developed reinforced cockpit door designs that could resist intrusion while still meeting decompression safety requirements. Hardware that stays locked against a battering ram or gunfire, but senses a sudden pressure drop and releases the door panel in a few thousandths of a second, fast enough to vent the pressure before it damages the airframe. The compliance deadline? April 9, 2003. 19 months after the attacks, not because anyone was slow-walking it, because building something bulletproof and breathable at 35,000 feet is genuinely hard. Here's a number that rarely makes it into the retelling. On the morning of September 11th, the entire United States had exactly 33 federal air marshals in service, confirmed by the Government Accountability Office's own history of the program. The Marshal program wasn't new. It expanded to nearly 400 agents in the mid-1980s after a wave of international hijackings forced Congress's hand. But as hijackings grew rare through the 1990s, the government let that number quietly shrink year after year until only 33 remained. Then the detail that makes it worse. According to ProPublica's reporting, not one of those 33 marshals was flying a domestic route. All 33 were held back for international flights the government considered high risk. All 8 of the hijacked flights that morning were domestic. The federal government's dedicated armed in-flight security program was focused on international flights rather than the domestic routes targeted that morning. That failure got fixed fast. Congressional testimony confirmed 600 new air marshals were hired, trained, and flying within 1 month. Within a year, the ranks had grown into the thousands. The exact figure has never been made public.
So line up the timelines. 33 marshals became thousands in under 12 months. The hardened cockpit door took 19 months. And there was a third fix still sitting completely untouched, putting a weapon directly into the hands of the pilot, the one person the hijackers were actually trying to reach.
That fix didn't move fast at all, and the reason involves a debate almost nobody's heard of: whether the gun meant to save the cockpit could be the thing that destroyed it. That debate wasn't hypothetical. Congress wrote it directly into the law. Buried inside the same bill that created the Armed Pilot Program, Section 44921 of the U.S. Code required regulators to analyze, before a single gun went into a cockpit, the risk that an accidental discharge could tear into the avionics, the electrical systems, or any other sensitive part of the aircraft. Lawmakers weren't just deciding whether pilots should carry a weapon. They were deciding whether that weapon could become the very thing that brought the plane down. The Arming Pilots Against Terrorism Act became law November 25, 2002, tucked inside the very same Homeland Security Act that finally created the Department of Homeland Security. Training began 5 months later. April 2003, the first class, roughly 40 dozen pilots, trains at a federal law enforcement facility in Georgia. By that September, the program moves permanently to Artesia, New Mexico, where it still trains pilots today. For nearly 5 years, the theoretical risk stayed theoretical. Then, March 22, 2008, aboard U.S. Airways Flight 1536, descending toward Charlotte at 8,000 feet, a pilot's holstered handgun discharges. The bullet tears through the cockpit wall and punches a hole clean through the fuselage. According to the Transportation Security Administration's own statement, the round missed every piece of critical wiring and avionics. The plane landed safely. Nobody on board even knew a gun had gone off until after they touched down. One of the risks Congress specifically required regulators to study, a firearm discharging in the cockpit, later occurred during a federal flight deck officer flight, and the aircraft landed safely anyway. So the question isn't whether an armed pilot can go wrong. One already has. The real question is whether 25 years later, that layered system, the doctrine, the door, the marshal, the gun, all holds. So go back to where this started. Muhammad Atta got flagged that morning by CAPS, and it changed nothing, because CAPS was never built to stop him. It was a piece of software the airlines ran themselves, matching payment types and itineraries, nothing more. Here's the detail that closes the loop. That exact system, airline rule, unchanged in its core design, stayed in place for years after the attacks. The federal government didn't fully take that screening function out of the airline's hands until a replacement called Secure Flight finished rolling out across every domestic and international carrier by the end of 2010, 9 years. Line up everything else next to that. The knife ban, 2 days. Creating TSA, 10 weeks. Hardened cockpit doors, 19 months. Thousands of air marshals, under a year. Armed pilots and the law forcing regulators to study whether their own guns could bring a plane down, 14 months. Tested for real in 2008 and survived. None of that was slow because anyone was careless. Steel, pressure vessels, and background checks on federal law enforcement don't move at the speed of grief. But the piece that actually decided who got flagged before boarding, the very thing that let Atta through, took the longest of all. If this changed how you think about that morning, the rest of this channel is built the same way. Real records, no guesswork. Subscribe if you want the next one. And if disappearing without a trace interests you more than a hijacking that everyone watched happen, go watch our video on the Malaysia Airlines flight that vanished, still the largest unsolved disappearance in aviation history.